You talked about voter enthusiasm on the national level. Can you bring us down to the state level? In the governor's race last time, it was absolutely anemic, something like 29 or 32%. The treasurer's race was down to about 11%. Do you see much enthusiasm, and can you specify that some of that enthusiasm may be determination to vote against certain candidates, in particular the governor, that may motivate folks to go to the polls, or do you think it'll be just as anemic as it was 4 years ago, the turnout?
So there's two halves to this question. It's pretty interesting. It's talking about really the level of enthusiasm and if that enthusiasm is driven by being more for or against somebody. Going back to 2015, what I found was interesting was that Democrats were very enthusiastic. And my theory about the why part was this. Democrats have been out of power for 8 years, plus David Vitter was somebody who you either loved or did not like, which of course meant that Democrats would be more enthusiastic to vote against him. So partisan turnout in the governor's race was actually, I saw a black percentage of the electorate of about 30%, which actually was almost exactly what it was in the Mary Landrieu race. The interesting thing is, after those 2 election cycles, well actually 3 election cycles if you want to include the Barack Obama election in 2012 here in Louisiana, after those 3 election cycles where you saw an uptick in Democratic performance, the question is if that became the new normal with regards to statewide turnout. Well, along came 2016, and black turnout was about 7–8% less than white turnout in the 2016 presidential election. It fell further in the 2016 Senate race, then it spiked up again for the treasurer's race. The treasurer's race to me was a very specific circumstance because this is truly the first time you had a race that nobody was really interested in, but you had a medium interest race for the New Orleans mayor's race, which resulted in Orleans Parish casting over 20% of the statewide vote. Just to illustrate how huge that number is, if let's pretend in the Cassidy Landrieu race that 20+% of the vote were coming from Orleans Parish, I calculated that it would have been roughly a 50-50 race rather than the 56-44 victory that Cassidy had over Landrieu. So in other words, New Orleans was voting way out of proportion to its numbers, purely because it was the only game in town, so to speak, relative to the other races around the state. When you're talking about voting for or against someone, I look at it this way. A lot depends on intensity of dislike or love. And so when you're talking about, and you have to look at that in terms of 2014 and 2015. So in 2014, Mary Landrieu had a time-tested get-out-the-vote apparatus, which she certainly tried to use to her benefit. However, the bottom had fallen out for her way back in 2009, in my opinion. In 2015, I think was a case of, like I said, Democrats were incredibly energized because they'd been out of power for 8 years, and they were excited about the chance of taking the governor's mansion back, plus the fact that David Vitter was, a fairly partisan Republican. I think that contributed to strong Democratic turnout as well. Also, too, I think you could make an argument in the 2015 governor's race that after the thermonuclear war that was going on between the 3 Republican candidates, that if you had voted for Darden or Angel, there was probably a decrease in enthusiasm in showing up in the runoff. So it can have an impact, bottom line, with regards to how it goes on a statewide election by statewide election basis. It really depends. I mean, like I said, there were some assumptions I was thinking that were going to be the new normal after the 2012, 14, and 15 elections in Louisiana that were dashed in 2016. So the thing that I look at the most when you're talking about that, and again, this is looking at data points in advance, given that more and more Louisianians early vote, that is something I typically look at for guideposts as to what I think partisan enthusiasm will be. Because I clearly saw that in 2016, Democratic enthusiasm was way off relative to what it was in 2012. And since 25% of the vote was cast early, that's a pretty good predictor of what's going to happen with the other 75%.